I've got to promote another book called The Sunburnt Country. It's not blue, it's orange, and it's by Joel Gresses. It's about climate change. I haven't read it yet, but I think we all should, okay? Right. Okay, now today's topic, what I was told by Arthur here, was about high electricity prices. And I'm not going to be, I'm an engineer, I'm not going to be nearly as exciting as Oliver. So what I'd like to do is start off by explaining the electricity system, how it evolved, how we got to where we are, and where we might go in the future. And I'm going to keep the general discussion very general, very little technical stuff, no formula, no physics. Those of you who are disappointed by that, well, you can ask me questions later. I'm also going to talk about climate change, because it's important in the mix. And I'm going to start right away by telling you why we have high electricity prices. And the first topic, Oliver might disagree with me, is uncertainty. The electricity system has a cost recovery period of varying from 12 to 40 years, much longer than any political cycle. And the uncertainty that we've got in the system, you don't have to be a genius to see it, is preventing future investment. And it's starting to create some shortages, especially in supply, and they will bite more and more. The second is the neoliberal system under which we operate. Oliver alluded to it, whereby the idea of the neoliberal politics is that governments can't do anything, it's all got to be handed over to private enterprise and the market. The electricity energy market is the strangest animal you will ever find in the universe. And to stop it from falling apart, we have to have some very sophisticated economic instruments. And that'll curl your hair. I'm not going to go down there. The other thing is the renewable energy system. It's making, and Oliver's explained this, is making the old fossil fuel powered stations obsolete because they're just not economic. So there's rapid change coming, and our current politicians seem to be standing on the tracks dazzled by the headlight of the oncoming train. And I'll elaborate on those few points later. Now, I'm going to go straight to climate, and I want to scare you. I really want to scare all of you, okay? Climate, why do you ask? Well, in the past, we generated electricity by burning fossil fuels and generating carbon dioxide, and I assume that you all understand this. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, warms the atmosphere, nasty, right? Now, the Paris Accord to which we signed up to said, hey, listen, everybody on the planet, let's try and limit climate temperature rise overall to 2 degrees centigrade, and let's aim for 1.5 degrees centigrade. To get this into perspective, who knows what the average temperature of the planet is right now? 15. 14.5. It was 14 when I went to university first. I'm 75 years old, so 50 years ago, we've already gone up 0.5 degree, okay? It's quite low. Now, why 2 degrees, you ask? At 2 degrees, we stand 50% chance of starting runaway climate change by melting the permafrosts of the northern hemisphere. Runaway means we've lost control. More greenhouse gases as the permafrost meet, warmer atmosphere, more greenhouse gases, warmer atmosphere, blah, 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 off it goes, right? We might as well go to Mars after that. 1.5 degrees centigrade gives us a 25% chance of getting to that instability point. Now, I want you to actually sink in. 50% chance, what does that mean? Imagine that we're all pissed out of our tiny brains and we're playing Russian roulette with a 6-shooter, and I put 3 rounds in the chamber and say, you have a go. Are you going to be game? Now, various people have done studies on our carbon budget. That is, how much more carbon can we burn before we hit 2 degrees, and how much more carbon can we burn before we hit 1.5 degrees? 2 degrees, we can only burn 40% of our developed coal reserves and 60% of our developed hydrocarbon reserves. That's oil and gas, right? 1.5 degrees, we can only burn, we've got to stop burning coal today, right now. Not tomorrow, now. And we can only burn 40% of our hydrocarbon reserves. Again, I want you to understand that. If you've got a coal mine and you've got a coal reserve of Once you've mined 40% of it, even though there's all this butte coal right in front of you, shut the place down, turn off the lights, and just before you do, ring Sims to take away the plant. Same goes for oil. Now, the implications of that are enormous. None of the major political parties seem to have realised this. You can Google the facts, it's not very hard to find. The only ones who've sort of vaguely got an idea are the Greens, and they're never going to get elected. So we've got this, and of course financially it's got huge implications. It means people like BP and Shell, Santos, their shares are really so far overvalued, it's just unreal. And we've got the technology to do it. It's a big ask, and we're going to have to work very hard, and we've got to really get our running shoes on and start running. The results for even my generation, for my children's and my grandchildren's generation, if we don't, are really, really ugly. The next thing I want to talk about is just a brief thing on energy. Everybody talks about energy. I suspect not many people actually know what it is. Terminator came in the 1830s, and it's simply the ability to do work. I mean, all of those that you've got an older car with manual gears in it, battery runs flat, you get to and you push it to roll it, and then you hope you can roll start it. You're applying force to the car to overcome its resistance, and the distance through which you push it by the force is the amount of work you've done on it. The formal thing is a joule. Now, a joule is when a force of a newton moves through a metre. A newton is about what you feel when you hold an apple up in the Earth's gravitational field, so they're not very large units. And if you do that if you do a joule's work in a second, the rate at which you do work is a watt. So you get your energy bill from the electricity company in kilowatt hours, and your gas bill in megajoules. They're all the same thing. 3.6 megajoules equals a kilowatt hour. Now, the electricity system, just talking further about energy, we can't make energy. We can just convert it from one form to another. The amount of energy in the universe has always been there. We're not going to increase it. We're not going to decrease it. We convert it from a good high-quality form to a low-quality form generally. So in coal-fired fossil fuel-powered power stations, we release the chemical energy in the coal or the gas to form heat, and we use the heat to drive some sort of heat engine. In a coal-fired power station makes steam. The steam drives a steam turbine, drives a generator. And presto, we've got electricity. And of course, in that process, we release carbon dioxide. For every tonne of coal you burn, you make 3.37 tonnes of carbon dioxide. And a modern power station, a big one, chews at full load through 400 tonnes of coal an hour. So it's making about 1,500 tonnes of carbon dioxide an hour. Scary sort of figures. The renewables basically use the free energy from the sun, either in a photovoltaic panel, where the photons excite the electrons and get them to whiz round a circuit. In the wind is a solar energy, it's just in a different form. The sun warms up the planet at different rates, hot air rises, cooler air goes in to replace it. The Coriolis force, which is due to the Earth's rotation, spins it all around, and we get wind. Wind drives wind's turbine, simple as that. And the other one is concentrated photovoltaic. You get a big field full of mirrors that you aim at a heat receiver, raise it to a high temperature, use that to raise steam. Sorry? Water. Waves. Yeah. Look, hydro, the one other thing is about electrical energy, that we can't store it. You can go down to a service station and buy a bottle of gas for your barbie. It contains about 7.5 kilos of methane. That represents about 100 kilowatt hours of energy, or 360 megajoules. And that's released when you burn it. You can't go and buy a tin of electrons. You can go and buy a battery, but the energy is stored chemically in the battery. So electrical energy can't be stored. It's a terrific energy transfer medium, but it's not a storage medium. So we can store it in batteries. Now we can build some very big efficient ones, like the Tesla battery in South Australia. We can pump water uphill and let it run downhill, or we can simply store it in high elevated dams and run it through hydro. People say wind, wave. My experience of wave energy, it's in the sea, and there are three important things about anything you put in the sea: corrosion, corrosion, and corrosion. Right? I can discuss the technicals of that, but if you bear that in mind, it sort of puts a bit of a damper on wave energy. It may yet evolve. I might be proved wrong. I'd be happy if I am. Now, how did we get to where we are with the electrical system? From the 50s to the 70s and right through to the 80s, state governments started spending public money on building large power stations on coal fields and developing high voltage transmission systems that brought the energy generated to load centres like big aluminium plants, steel plants into cities. The reason for moving them out of the cities, and we've got remnants of it like White Bay, which are built in the cities, was to cut pollution in the cities. Those of you old enough can remember the killer smogs in London. I worked in Europe. Shortly after that, the killer smogs in the Ruhr Valley made London look like a clean air paradise. It was all great fun. And those of us that worked in it were very proud of what we did. We were cleaning up the environment, and it was very, very high quality engineering. We were proud of what we did. We just forgot that the atmosphere is not an infinite carbon sink. So that's pretty much where we left up. And when you go to energy conversion systems, they've all got pluses and minuses. Coal-fired power stations, sure, they can operate autonomously if they've got a big enough pile of coal out the front door. But they have limitations. You can't start and stop them like your motor car. From cold start on a big power station takes 48 hours to get it to actually produce serious power. They don't accept load changes very quickly. They're rather sluggish to accept load changes, and they cannot operate at less than 30% of their rated load. They become unstable. It's just a control problem. That 30% instability meant that we've got to provide 30% load for them when we all go to bed. And that is the base load that has to be there to keep the system from falling apart. It's not there because it's somehow decreed by God. It's a pure artefact of a steam power station system. So in between, so that's why you've got off-peak hot water heaters, why industries that run 7x24 get special tariffs, and why we have pumped storage with coal-fired power stations. The excess energy can be used to pump water uphill and let it run downhill to cover the gaps where the power stations can't quickly pick up load. Now, that was all well and good. State governments ran it. They appointed people as dispatch engineers whose job it was to figure out what to turn on, what day, to make the energy cost-effective and reliable. Now, in the 80s, the neoliberal economics started to invade the scene. It was this thing thought up at Massachusetts Institute of Technology in America, all these bright young lads who said, governments can't do anything. Oddly enough, we all trust them with defence, but anyway, we'll go aside. Go away! And so private industry can handle it. The assets have got to be owned by private enterprise, and the marketplace rules. Now remember, I told you, you cannot store electrical energy. It has no shelf life. The minute that the system demands more power, it's got to be made available that very instant. So this marketplace now became a very strange thing. I can't say, hey guys, I've got 2,000 kilowatt hours of energy here that I want to sell. No. So we've invented, and Oliver can explain, Oliver probably can explain it to you better than I can. We have these very complicated instruments for settling your electricity prices, just to stop the wheels from falling off. Now, and so we have energy regulators, we have private-owned companies, we have transmission systems. And if you think about it, it's starting to look a little bit like a mouse designed by a committee, isn't it? And we all know what that is. It's a camel. So the other side of renewables is, just for renewables, you've got photovoltaics, you've got wind, and you've got concentrated solar. You might have some other bits and pieces around the place. Normal hydro, run-of-river hydro, continual hydro is renewable. Tassie runs on it. They've got a very low carbon footprint. They can pick up load fairly quickly, very quickly. They've got no input energy costs. And that makes the power from them cost of the power very stable, because all that you're doing is servicing the capital that you've involved and doing a little bit of maintenance. And you'd be amazed at how little maintenance they need. Go out to a wind farm, and you'll probably see some sheep wandering around, and that'll be the only people, and every sort of 6 months a couple of technicians comes up and polishes things. Not like a steam power stations where there's a staff of 100 running around frantically. So that's sort of the point in energy systems. Now, by the end of the 80s, we were in this funny situation. We'd started to implement the neo-policies, and they were largely by Liberal governments who were pretty much selling everything off. Labor did it as well. But the system might work okay in the United States, where you've got very large numbers of generators, large alternative transmission systems. Australia, it's all very small. Monopolistic tendencies appear almost instantly. We've got a very small power system. The idea on the transmission system was you can charge for your maintenance, you can charge for your capital costs. The losses on your system, if you run a lossy system, makes the energy at the other end very expensive, and the purchaser can choose to buy from somebody else. In Australia? You're kidding your bloody selves. You know, we have one link to Victoria, one link to Queensland, and a very feeble link out to South Australia. Who's, you know, another one to Tassie. Who's going to choose the alternatives? There aren't any. So one of the two monopolistic things, one of the big monopolistic things that have happened, because we've got so few players, I mean, you've got AEG and Energy Australia on the east coast, on Queensland Energy, who's state government, who own virtually all of the generating assets. They can game the system. You can, with the neo-economic model for generation works that if I can generate electricity at $30 a megawatt hour, 3 cents a kilowatt hour, and I'm the cheapest, I bid myself on. When the demand exceeds my capacity, Oliver, who can generate at 40 cents a kilowatt hour or $40 a megawatt hour, bids himself on, and we both get paid $40 a megawatt hour. So if I'm very cheap, it pays for me to withhold some of my capacity and force Oliver onto the market sooner, because I'm really making money at that point. And that's happened now. The regulator, AEMO, who Oliver alluded to, as they're set up, have no authority to make me change my behaviour. As a matter of fact, it's totally legitimate. So that's one force. The other force was, of course, cost recovery from the transmission systems. And that went through a very woolly period and was short of time. So it's a very funny story, but you'll have to ask me about that later. But again, you're in a monopolistic situation. Monopolies are very, very hard for governments to control, almost impossible. So that's where we're sort of at. We've got a monopolistic system. And the other thing, of course, is creating uncertainty, which is largely created by Abbott when he wrecked the carbon tax. And what to put everybody on notice is, one government introduced a carbon tax, another government wrecked it. The third government that comes around can easily reintroduce it in a different form. So I'd better make my money very, very quickly. That means nobody in the private sector is going to build a coal-fired power station. Forget about people chaining themselves to bulldozers. It won't even get out of the boardroom, because you're halfway. These things take 10 years to plan, 10 years to build, and have got a cost recovery period of 40 years. Halfway through planning, you've changed governments, and the whole thing's gone belly up on you. Which board, sensible board, and these guys aren't stupid, is going to put their foot in that pot of boiling water, sulfuric acid? Nobody. So what do we get? We get lots and lots of wind turbines and PV systems. PV systems can go up almost overnight. The last power station that was built was 200 megawatts. It was finished 6 months ahead of time and under budget. The erection of these is almost fully mechanised nowadays. Wind turbines, a little bit longer to build, a little bit longer to plan, but your cost recovery is typically 10 to 15 years. You don't have to worry too much about government changes. And hey, what, you're not paying anything for the energy input. So so we're in a highly speculative market now. Private industry is speculating on what the energy, on recovering their cash quickly and hoping that they can make a big profit. That's all good, but is it the way to run a stable electrical system? I don't think so. How much time have I got? Not much. Not much, I didn't think so. Just to reiterate, our prices are high from an engineering point of view. I mean, we've got all these other funny financial fiddle-diddles on the side, but from an energy point of view, uncertainty, we've got lack of supply, we're starting to run into tightening supply, and the way that we manage it economically. I introduced climate because you hear a lot of, especially right-wing politicians, saying we have to be totally agnostic about how we generate power. Right? We can select any power system as long as it's cheap enough and can't damage the economy. That is utter crap. We have to be totally partisan. We must not build another power generator that uses fossil fuel. Must not. Okay? So now, I mean, some of you will say, hey, listen, if we go for a fully renewable energy system, why can't they game the system the way that they already are? They've got two problems. One is you're only servicing capital, and that meter runs rain, hail or shine 24 hours a day. You're not paying anything for the fuel, so you might as well bid yourself onto the system as soon as you can to try and make whatever money you can. Secondly, because the entities are relatively small and much distributed, that monopoly tendency is squashed. So the question is now, where do we go from here? Well, the block here is political. It's not technical. We can get 100% power generation with renewables, no problem. It's been demonstrated time and time again by august professors. So get onto your local member and squeeze them. Say, you've got to vote, you've got to go for renewables. Doesn't matter what political party you're on. You can threaten them. You can say, listen, mate, if you don't vote for renewables, I'll vote green next time. Doesn't matter if you do, they'll be terrified. And the other thing is, put as much solar panels on your roof as you can fit. Thank you.